Okay, so we're going to work with curves, um, and we're also going to utilize the color sampler tool. So I'm going to choose the nose as the highlight. Notice on my info panel I have sample 1 is an RGB value of 220. I'm going to choose the underneath the, I'll just choose the darkest shadow here. And for now, I'll just choose those two values. Um, that way, you can kind of determine what you're more interested in terms of high contrast or low contrast. But what this does is it lets you know in relation to the scale here where you lie in terms of where those values rest in terms of the zone system. So we're at 220 for our highlight, which is between zone 8 and 9. When I work on a highlight, I get it up to 245 because I like high contrast. If you're at 255, you're at pure white, and you never want to be at that value. That's pretty dangerous territory there. And I also like a deep shadow, but I do like some texture in my shadows, so that value will be somewhere around 15 to 20 for my shadow. So I'm going to click on this tab here. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open up a curve. And notice here I'm going to drag this out just so we can see it a little better. Right there. So right here it's listed as curves. We can change the name of that so we can stay organized. I'm going to title this contrast. I'm going to drag this down so we can see our curve. Like so. I'm going to utilize the hand tool. If you hold the space bar down, that'll let you slide your image over a bit. And now the curve seems like it's intimidating because you have this graph and then this line that cuts across it, and you have a histogram inside of there. And it's like, well, where do I plot the point? Well, the cool thing about it is you have some tools to help you get started. I really like this click and drag tool. So if we select that and we turn that on and we go to our point sample right here, if you notice on the curve, it's telling you where that value exists on your curve. And now if I press and drag, it'll lift that value up. And then you can also see on the info panel where you want that value to be precisely. So I want it at 245. My original value is at 220. Now I'm at 245. So now I'm going to go ahead and select, using this tool, still on, it's a little dropper. I'm going to go to my sample 2. I'm going to press and drag down. And now I want this value to be, let's say, 20. Just like that. Now what we end up with is a standard S-curve, which is a standard contrast adjustment on your curve line. If you wanted to adjust the midtones, you would plot a third point and just click on the curve and you would lift that up. And what that does is it adjusts your midtone, like so. You never want to have more than 3 points on your curve because it just confuses you and it confuses the computer. If you want to get rid of a point, you just select that point and you drag it off. It's kind of like if you own a dog, it's like picking fleas off. Just like that. So your highlight exists at the top of the curve. Just generally in this area here is where your highlight exists. And then in a general sense, in this area is where your shadow, your deepest shadow exists as well. So you just plot a point anywhere. If you didn't want to use that press and drag tool, and you would just make a subtle S. If you wanted it to be low contrast, you'd make the S very subtle. If you wanted high contrast, you would deepen your shadow quite a bit, and you would lift this highlight, but remember, you don't want to go above 245. And my shadow right now is at 8, and if I was printing on matte paper, that would just turn into a black hole because the ink would just absorb into the paper and you would probably lose all this information in there, which is why I like to keep that, you know, somewhere around, I'd say 10 to 25. Let's do 15. If I zoom in to that area, I still have texture inside of there. It's very hard to see on the projector, but on my screen there's a little bit of texture in there. And now I can lift my midtone. If I wanted to bring in a little bit more information, bring that value up to 20 instead. The other cool thing about your curve is you can select your point with your mouse, and then you can use the arrow keys on your keyboard to precisely move that point around. So now I'm at 20 exactly. I'm going to zoom out. And now to hide your samples, you can just click on the Move tool, which is at the very top of your tools. You can also just hit the V key. If you want to reactivate your samples, just click on the Sample tool again, and your samples come back on. If you want to move a sample, just hover over it, and you can move it around and drop it somewhere else. If you want to get rid of a sample, hold the Option key, and you should get some little scissors, and then you just click on it, and it'll delete that sample.